There are moments in life when silence carries more answers than words. When the body feels tired, the mind restless, and the soul faintly whispers that something ancient is missing. In that silence, something begins to call, not from the noise of the world, but from within, from a place that remembers. A memory older than time, older than medicine, older than the very word healing. It is the memory of balance, of harmony between the seen and unseen, between the body that walks the earth and the light that animates it. This is where the forgotten method of the elders of the East begins, not with a pill nor a prayer, but with presence. For thousands of years before laboratories, before hospitals, before even written language, the elders of the East observed. They watched the way rivers healed themselves after storms. They noticed how the morning sun, gentle and golden, awakened the dew and gave it a pulse. They listened to the silence between heartbeats, the pauses between breaths, the rhythm that connected everything, and they realized something we have long forgotten, that life itself is a healer, that the energy flowing through all things could be guided, shaped, and invited, not controlled. In the mountain temples of what is now forgotten China, in the quiet gardens of early Tibet, and beneath the whispering banyan trees of India, these elders discovered what we might now call the architecture of life. They didn't speak of molecules or cells, but of currents, the flow of chi, prana, or what they sometimes called the breath of heaven. It was this current, they believed, that determined the balance of the human body, the clarity of the mind, and the purity of the soul. When it flowed, one was whole. When it was blocked, illness appeared, not as punishment but as a message, a reminder to return to harmony. Modern science has touched the edges of this truth, but stopped at the doorway. It has measured frequencies, fields, and vibrations, yet still doubts the soul behind them. The elders, however, did not doubt. They knew. To them, the human body was not a machine to be repaired, but a garden to be tended. Illness was not an enemy to be defeated, but a sign that something sacred had been neglected. And so they turned to what was always near, the elements, the breath, the water, the quiet light of dawn. In their daily rituals, simplicity was sacred. A bowl of water placed beneath the morning sun was not a gesture of superstition, but a science of spirit. They believed that the sunlight, touching the surface of the water, carried the invisible essence of the universe, frequencies that aligned with the body's hidden codes. They would drink this water slowly, mindfully, sometimes after speaking a word of gratitude into it. They said the water would remember. It would carry that vibration into every cell, reminding the body of what it was made to do, to heal. Imagine an old man sitting beneath a tree, his hands weathered by time, his breath steady as the tide. He dips his fingers into a bowl of water and watches the ripples fade. To the untrained eye, he is doing nothing. But to those who understand, he is speaking to life itself. He is synchronizing his breath with the pulse of the world. In that moment, his body, mind, and spirit become one continuous flow. The heart slows, the mind clears, and something unseen begins to awaken. This was the forgotten method, effortless alignment with what is already perfect. We, in our modern rush, have traded that silence for sound, that awareness for distraction. We seek healing in what can be bought, not in what can be remembered. But the elders knew that the greatest cure is remembrance, that every human being carries a divine code, written not in words, but in energy. It is the same code that tells a seed when to open, a wound when to close, and the heart when to beat again. When this code is remembered, the body returns to its natural intelligence, an intelligence that never needed saving, only awakening. They spoke of 4 gates through which healing enters: breath, touch, sound, and intention, each one a key. The breath calms the river of the body, touch guides energy where it must flow, sound reorganizes vibration, breaking what is stagnant, intention gives shape to it all. But beyond these gates was something more subtle: presence. Presence was the language through which the universe responded. If one stood before the morning sun, fully present, the very cells would listen, the blood would hum in resonance with light. The mind, freed from noise, would open to the sacred intelligence woven into every atom. Ancient scrolls tell of a ritual so simple that most dismissed it. a cup of warm water at sunrise, a silent prayer, and 3 deep breaths. The elders called it returning the water to the light. They believed that when the body first awakens, the veil between the seen and unseen is thinnest. The cells are still listening, the energy still pure from the night's silence. In this moment, water could absorb intention like the sky absorbs light. A single thought of gratitude, spoken softly, could change its entire vibration. And when that water entered the body, it carried the message, heal. The modern mind may question this. How could water remember? How could intention travel through matter? Yet science, in its quiet humility, has begun to ask similar questions. We now know that thoughts alter neural patterns, that emotion changes heart rhythm, that coherence between the heart and brain produces measurable fields around the body. The elders knew this long ago, not through machines but through stillness. They felt the subtle expansion when the heart was pure, the contraction when it was not. To them, every thought was an offering, every word a vibration that could heal or harm. One elder once said, "The healer is not the one who removes the pain, but the one who reminds the body how to listen." And this is the forgotten truth. We do not heal by adding more. We heal by removing the noise that makes us forget. The elders of the East understood that the energy that animates all life is always flowing, but the mind, clouded by fear, regret, and restlessness, builds walls against it. Their method was the art of dissolving these walls, not through effort, but through surrender. To practice this method, they began not with movement, but with stillness. They taught their students to sit by running water, to listen without trying to hear, to breathe without trying to control, to let thoughts rise and fall like leaves on the current. The goal was not silence, but awareness of what lies beneath it, the hum of life itself. They said that when one could feel this hum not only around them but within, the healing had already begun, because the body, they believed, does not separate from the earth. It echoes it. When the earth breathes, we breathe. When the earth renews, we renew. Those who followed this path noticed changes that seemed miraculous, chronic pain easing without reason, wounds closing faster, anxiety dissolving into calm. But the elders would smile and say, "It is not a miracle, it is remembrance." They believed the body's blueprint was divine, that the same intelligence that spins galaxies also orchestrates the beating of your heart. And when one aligns with that rhythm, healing becomes as natural as dawn following night. There is a passage from an ancient text, now almost lost to translation, that says, "When the breath enters the heart and the heart opens to light, the sickness flees, for it cannot exist where truth resides." This was not metaphor to them. They meant it literally. They practiced breath patterns that directed energy toward the heart, visualizing golden light entering with each inhale, spreading warmth and renewal. The method was not mechanical. It was devotional. Every breath a prayer, every pause an act of trust. Today, people seek complicated solutions, supplements, surgeries, endless diagnoses. But the elders' wisdom was the opposite of complexity. It was humility. They believed the simplest things were the most powerful. Clean water, slow breath, pure intention and gratitude. They would often say, "The one who greets the morning sun in stillness heals more than the one who runs to medicine in haste." Not because medicine is wrong, but because the source of healing begins before medicine even exists. In quiet valleys, where mist drifts over tea fields and bells echo through the air, this forgotten method survived, passed from teacher to disciple, whispered rather than written. It survived wars, floods, and empires, hidden in gestures, rituals, and breath. A hand over the heart before drinking water, a moment of silence before eating, a deep exhale before speaking. Each act seemingly ordinary, yet vibrating with divine remembrance. They believed that if the world ever forgot this, sickness would become the language of the earth, the body's cry for us to remember what we once knew. And perhaps that is why you are hearing this now. Because somewhere deep inside, you already know this truth. You have felt it in moments when time stopped, when a sunset made you weep, when a breeze felt like a message, when water on your skin felt alive. Those moments are not accidents. They are invitations. The same invitations the elders received when they first began to listen, Healing, they said, is not about fighting disease. It is about restoring rhythm. Every cell in your body dances to a symphony of frequencies. When fear, anger, or sadness linger, the music falters. But when love, gratitude, and silence return, the music begins again. And the body, remembering the song, follows. This was their forgotten method, the art of remembering the music of life. It began with curiosity, with a single question asked in stillness. What if the power to heal has never left us? The elders of the East believed that when one dares to ask this question sincerely, the answer does not come in words but in a feeling, a warmth in the chest, a softening behind the eyes, a lightness in the breath. That feeling, they said, is the beginning of return, and so as the wind moves through the trees and the world hums in its ancient rhythm, you begin to remember. You are not separate from it. You are it, the breath of the mountain, the light of the dawn, the current that never stops flowing. And somewhere within that stillness, the forgotten method waits, not to be learned but to be remembered. There comes a moment in every seeker's path when curiosity becomes reverence, when what began as a question begins to feel like destiny. The whispers of the forgotten method grow louder, and what once felt mystical begins to reveal itself as truth wrapped in poetry. You begin to understand that the elders of the East were not dreamers. They were observers of the invisible laws that bind heaven and earth. They did not worship the sun, nor the wind, nor the water. They communed with them, as one speaks to an old friend. They knew that within these elements lived the pulse of creation itself. One of their sacred writings speaks of the river of quiet light, a metaphor for the current that flows through all living things. They said that this current carries the memory of balance, and that illness occurs when we forget its rhythm. It was not mere philosophy. It was their science, one the modern world is only beginning to rediscover under new names: biofield, coherence, quantum resonance. To them, it was simpler, life listening to itself. The revelation always began with water. They saw in it a mirror of the human soul, clear when still, clouded when disturbed, capable of reflecting the heavens when calm. They taught that when one touches water with awareness, one is not only cleansing the body, but aligning with the divine pattern of flow. The elders would take water at dawn, place it in clay vessels, and allow the first light of the sun to fall upon it. As light entered the liquid, they would whisper words of gratitude, infusing it with meaning. Science might call it intention. They called it awakening. Every syllable, every breath carried vibration. To the elders, vibration was the architecture of reality, the unseen geometry behind every leaf, every tone, every heartbeat. When the mind was at peace, it produced harmony. When it was restless, it produced noise. They knew that harmony attracts harmony, that peace within creates peace without. This is why their temples were silent, not because they feared words, but because they honored sound. They believed that when sound is pure, when it rises from a quiet heart, it carries power beyond imagination. A single chant, uttered with pure intent, could alter the currents of the body. There are still records of these chants, though most of them have lost their true pronunciation. One of them, translated loosely, means, "The light within returns to the source." The elders used it when the body was sick or the heart troubled. They would sit facing the morning sun, the palms open, and whisper this sound in rhythm with their breath. As they did, something would change. Their pulse would slow, their skin would flush with warmth, and their eyes would soften as if seeing the invisible. They said the chant awakened what they called the fire beneath the waters, the life force that lies dormant in every human being. When the fire rises, it meets the cooling water of the heart, and together they form balance, the sacred union of energy and emotion. Modern physiology might call it homeostasis, but the elders called it divine harmony. In their understanding, disease was not an invasion but an imbalance. Healing was not external correction but inner reunion. There were three symbols that guided their method: the circle, the breath, and the wave. The circle represented the eternal flow of life, no beginning, no end, only motion. The breath was the messenger between worlds, the bridge between the visible and invisible. The wave symbolized the continuous dance between form and formlessness, reminding them that what rises must fall, and what contracts must expand. These were not mere drawings, but living codes. They painted them on walls, carved them on stones, and traced them on the surface of water before each ritual. They believed the shapes themselves emitted frequencies that guided the mind into balance. Imagine standing at the edge of a still lake at sunrise. The air is cool. The surface reflects the sky like polished glass. You toss a single pebble into it and watch the ripples spread outward. Each ripple touches another until the entire lake moves. That is what intention does, they said. A single thought, when released with purity, travels through the field of life and reshapes it. The elders practiced this daily. They would begin with one thought, gratitude, forgiveness, or love, and release it into the invisible. They knew it would return multiplied because all things seek resonance. They believed that the body, too, is a lake, a living reservoir of energy constantly influenced by emotion, thought, and environment. When anger or fear disturbs its surface, the reflection of the divine becomes distorted. The method was to calm the waters, to sit, breathe, and remember. When the lake of the body becomes still again, the light returns. Healing, then, was simply clarity returning to water. There is a legend among the monasteries that speaks of a physician monk who healed without herbs or instruments. People from distant lands came to him, desperate for relief. They said he would place a bowl of water before each patient, hold their hand above it, and close his eyes. Minutes would pass in silence. Then he would whisper a single phrase and give the water to drink. The sick recovered. Not because of the water alone, but because his intention had imprinted upon it the vibration of wholeness. His silence was his medicine, his faith, his cure. The revelation of their method was not in what they did, but in how they were. Every act, no matter how ordinary, was sacred when performed in awareness. Eating, walking, breathing, all were rituals of alignment. When one elder walked through a forest, the wind would change direction. Birds would land closer. The air around him would feel lighter. People said he carried no aura of power, only the presence of peace, and that peace altered everything it touched. They knew something we still struggle to accept. The body is light, condensed into form. When that light is dimmed by worry or pain, it does not vanish. It merely waits for recognition. Their practices, the breath, the sound, the water, were ways of remembering that light. Once remembered, it could be strengthened, and once strengthened, it could restore anything. In their teachings, there was a sacred number, 7. 7 breaths to cleanse the body, 7 days to renew the rhythm of life, 7 cycles of the moon to complete a transformation. Each represented a stage of remembrance. The first breath, they said, awakens the body. The second calms the heart. The third silences the mind. The fourth unites them. The fifth opens the inner eye. The sixth brings the fire of life upward. And the seventh, the final, dissolves the self into light. Those who reached the 7th breath were said to radiate peace so deep that even wild animals would approach without fear. It was during these breath practices that many experienced what the elders called the golden silence, a state in which the boundaries between body and world dissolve. The breath seems to breathe itself. The heart and earth beat in unison. Thoughts become light, floating through awareness like dust through a sunbeam. It is in this silence that the forgotten method reveals its true nature, that healing is not something we do, but something we allow. In one preserved story, an elder once said to his disciple, "Do not heal the wound. Remove the shadow that keeps light from entering." That single line carries the essence of all their teachings. To them, sickness was a shadow, a temporary absence of light. The remedy was not to fight the shadow, but to let light return. Through stillness, through faith, through remembering that we are made of the same radiance that births stars. The revelation deepened as they observed nature. They saw that everything healed through rhythm. The tides cleansed the shore not once but endlessly. The moon waxed and waned, teaching renewal through letting go. The trees shed leaves to make space for new life. They realized that the human body follows the same laws. When energy is allowed to ebb and flow, to rise and rest, balance returns naturally. Only resistance creates pain. To heal, one must surrender to the rhythm of life, not resist it. They found that water carried this lesson better than any teacher. When poured, it adapts. When frozen, it waits. When boiled, it transforms. Yet through all its forms, it never loses its essence. They saw in this the map of the human spirit, the reminder that no matter the form, the essence remains divine. "Be as water," they would say, "and nothing can harm you." It is said that when one elder neared death, his students gathered around him and asked for final guidance. He smiled, placed a drop of water on his tongue and whispered, "I return to the source." His body exhaled once and he was gone, not in suffering but in peace. They say the air around him shimmered like heat rising from desert sand. To them, it was the visible sign of the invisible truth. He had merged back into the current. The forgotten method at its core was never about adding something to the body, but about removing what never belonged: fear, doubt, separation. They taught that the purest state of health is unity. The moment one remembers that there is no difference between self and source, between breath and breeze, between water and blood, between light and soul. That is the moment of healing. This is the revelation science has been circling without realizing. That consciousness is not within the body is within consciousness. The elders lived from this knowing. When they healed others, they did not send energy. They simply saw the person as already whole. That vision, that unwavering faith, reorganized the energy field of those before them. They saw health and health appeared. For them, healing was seeing truth deeply enough for illusion to vanish. Modern eyes might call it impossible, but impossibility exists only where understanding ends. The elders of the East stood where understanding began, at the edge of silence. There they found no separation between thought and matter, between vibration and form. Every gesture became creation. Every breath became blessing. Every drop of water became a mirror of the divine. The forgotten method is not forgotten because it failed. It is forgotten because it was too simple. It required no temple but the heart, no tool but attention, no ritual but sincerity. The elders knew that once humanity turned its gaze outward, to conquer, to measure, to own, it would lose the thread of the inward path. But they also knew the path could never truly disappear, only wait beneath the noise like a river flowing beneath stone. That river still flows through you. It whispers in your breath, in the warmth of your chest, in the subtle pulse behind your eyes. It calls you to remember what you once knew, that healing is not a miracle, it is memory returning to light. And so the revelation unfolds. You are not broken, you are merely covered in dust. Beneath it, the same current that moved through the elders, through the rivers, through the stars, is still alive, waiting to be remembered. When revelation takes root, transformation begins, not as a sudden miracle, but as a quiet unfolding, like dawn dissolving the night. The forgotten method of the elders of the East was not merely to understand healing, but to become it. They believed that wisdom without embodiment was like wind trapped in a jar, sound without movement. True transformation, they said, begins when the heart remembers its original rhythm, when knowledge becomes breath, and when practice becomes being. In the beginning, disciples who sought this path came with questions, desperate, urgent, filled with the noise of modern suffering. "How do I heal?" they would ask. The elders would smile, motion for silence, and gesture toward the rising sun. They would say nothing. For the student, silence felt unbearable at first, an emptiness where answers should be. But over time, something strange happened. The silence began to speak, not in words but in sensations. The warmth of sunlight on the face, the subtle rhythm of the breath aligning with the wind, the sound of the heart echoing the movement of distant waves. That was how the transformation began, through stillness that taught more than language ever could. One elder taught that every person carries within them 3 fires: the fire of the body, the fire of the mind, and the fire of the spirit. When they burn in harmony, the light of the soul shines clear, but when one overpowers the others, imbalance takes root. The forgotten method was designed to bring these fires into resonance again, not through control but through surrender, through awareness, through love, to awaken the fire of the body. The elders practiced movement as meditation, slow circular gestures guided by breath, performed at dawn and dusk when the veil between worlds was thin. Each movement followed the rhythm of nature, The rise of the sun, the curve of the moon, the flow of the river. They called it the dance of balance. In every step they honored gravity, the unseen hand that holds all things. They would lower their hands toward the earth, acknowledging its pull, then lift them skyward, remembering their own lightness. The balance between down and up, heavy and light, form and spirit. This was the first transformation, the body remembering its divine geometry. To awaken the fire of the mind, they turned to stillness, to observing thoughts as passing clouds, to learning that not every storm must be followed. They taught that thoughts are the echoes of energy, and that peace does not come from quieting the mind, but from remembering that one is not the mind at all. When the disciple finally stopped trying to control thought and began to watch it like a river, a miraculous thing occurred. The river calmed itself. That was the second transformation. The mind remembering it is a mirror, not a storm. And to awaken the fire of the spirit, the most sacred of all, they returned to gratitude, simple gratitude. Before drinking water, they whispered thanks. Before sleep, they bowed to life. Before breath, they offered silence. In every act they saw the divine reflected, in pain as much as in pleasure, for they knew that gratitude opens the final gate, the gate of light that reconnects the soul with the source. That was the third transformation, the spirit remembering its own eternity. Those who reached this stage began to change in ways that defied logic. Their eyes grew brighter, their pulse steadier. Their presence itself felt healing, not because of any technique, but because their very energy had become medicine. It is said that an elder could calm the fever of a child simply by sitting beside them. They didn't send energy, they radiated alignment. The cells of the sick would remember harmony in their presence, the same way an instrument tunes itself when placed near one already in pitch. They taught that every emotion was a form of energy-seeking passage. To resist it was to create pressure. To allow it was to create flow. When anger arose, they did not fight it. They breathed into it, acknowledged it, and asked what message it carried. When sorrow came, they did not drown in it. They let it cleanse what was heavy. They treated every emotion as a visitor from the unseen, bringing lessons from the soul. To suppress was to forget. To feel was to remember. And when one remembered fully, emotion became energy, and energy became light. One teaching spoke of a ritual known as the hour of reflection. Each evening, as the sky shifted from gold to indigo, the elders would sit beside water, a lake, a bowl, even a reflection in a cup. They would gaze into it and ask silently, "What have I carried today that does not belong to me?" Then they would exhale, watching the surface ripple, symbolizing release. They believed the water absorbed what the heart was ready to let go of. Over time, this practice became a living purification. The body felt lighter, the mind clearer, and the spirit freer. The water, they said, took nothing from them that they did not choose to surrender. There was another practice, simple, sacred, and almost forgotten. They would place their palms over their hearts and whisper to themselves, "I am life, remembering itself." To modern ears, it may sound poetic, but to them, it was literal. The body, when reminded of its divine origin, begins to reorganize its energy to match that truth. Cells respond. The immune system strengthens, hormones balance. Because energy follows awareness, and awareness infused with reverence becomes creation itself. Transformation, then, was not a process of becoming something new, but a return to what has always been. The elders saw disease as dissonance, a song out of tune. Healing, therefore, was simply retuning the instrument. They tuned it with breath, with sound, with stillness, with love. In their understanding, love was not emotion, but frequency, the highest resonance possible. It was the note that brought all other notes into harmony. When one loved, truly, silently, without condition, the energy field expanded, drawing light into every atom. They would often say, "Where love abides, disease cannot." But transformation demanded truth. It required facing the shadows that had been denied, the fears, the regrets, the unspoken grief. The elders called this walking through the night of mirrors. Each mirror showed a reflection of what one believed oneself to be. Some reflections were beautiful, others unbearable. The disciple was taught not to judge either, but to see both as illusions, fragments of light distorted through time. To stand before them without flinching was the mark of readiness. When one could look into every mirror and feel compassion rather than shame, the heart would open fully. The light could then pass through unobstructed. At this stage, transformation became visible. The breath grew slower, deeper. The face softened. The voice carried calm. Even the space around them seemed to respond. Plants thrived, animals approached, storms avoided. The elders said that when one returns to harmony, the universe rearranges itself around that harmony. The outer world bends to match the inner. They did not see this as magic, but as the natural order reasserting itself. For they understood that the universe is not separate from consciousness. It is its reflection. One ancient phrase carved into temple stone reads, "The healer is healed in the act of healing." It meant that transformation is not solitary, it radiates. When the elders healed others, they did not deplete themselves, they were replenished. Because to heal another was to remind both of their shared source. The current of life, when given freely, returns multiplied. This is why they never feared giving too much. They knew the well of light could never run dry. They also understood that transformation was cyclical, like the seasons. There would be times of blooming, times of stillness, times of decay, times of rebirth. They honored them all equally. When the body felt weary, they rested. When emotion surged, they listened. When inspiration came, they acted. To force was to fall out of rhythm. To allow was to remain in harmony. They knew that even decay was sacred, for it made room for renewal. Every ending, they said, is the breath between heartbeats. And within that breath, that pause, transformation completed itself. The body regenerated, the mind expanded, the spirit remembered. The person who once sought healing no longer sought at all. They had become the medicine. The forgotten method was never about finding something outside oneself. It was about remembering that every element of the cosmos already lives within. The same minerals in the earth course through your veins. The same light that nourishes the plants glows behind your eyes. The same water that moves through rivers moves through your blood. There is no separation. To realize this fully is to awaken. In this stage, those who practiced began to feel energy not as an idea, but as a living presence. When they placed their hands over their bodies, warmth would rise. When they focused on the heart, tingling would spread. They described it as liquid light, a sensation both electric and peaceful. Science might one day measure it, but the elders lived it. They used this awareness to guide healing, allowing energy to flow where attention rested. Over time, they became masters of their inner rivers, redirecting current, dissolving pain, restoring balance, but always with humility, for they knew they were not controlling energy, only cooperating with it. And when transformation deepened fully, something extraordinary occurred. The boundary between inner and outer began to dissolve. The air seemed to shimmer faintly around them. The body felt both solid and weightless, the heartbeat not as a separate organ, but as part of a vast symphony, the pulse of the earth itself. The elders called this the second birth. It was the moment when the illusion of separation completely faded. From that point onward, the person no longer lived in the world lived through them. Transformation was the bridge, the sacred passage from seeking to knowing, from belief to embodiment, from duality to unity. And once crossed, there was no returning to the old ways of seeing. The forgotten method had fulfilled its purpose, to awaken the healer within every being. And so the elders taught their final lesson. Do not worship the light outside you. Become the light that remembers. It is in this remembrance that the deepest transformation occurs, not in what changes, but in what reveals itself as eternal. There is a stillness that descends before awakening, a silence so vast that even the breath seems to hesitate within it. The elders of the East called this silence the moment between worlds. It is the point where transformation matures into light, where the seeker no longer seeks because what was sought is no longer elsewhere. It lives now within the pulse, the gaze, the smallest motion of the hand. The forgotten method, when lived long enough, reveals its true nature, not as a healing technique, but as a doorway into remembrance itself. In the mountain monasteries where the mist meets the morning, disciples would rise before dawn. They would walk barefoot upon the wet earth, feeling its pulse under their soles. In the distance, a temple bell would sound once, not as a command, but as a reminder, a sound to awaken the memory of rhythm. The elders taught that awakening does not arrive like thunder, it unfolds like breath. It is the recognition that everything one touches, sees, and feels is already sacred. The body, the air, the heartbeat, the sorrow, all threads of the same divine tapestry. To awaken, they said, is to finally perceive what has always been true, that light never left the human heart. It only became obscured by the dust of forgetting. And so the method now becomes revelation embodied. The water is no longer an external tool, it becomes the reflection of one's own clarity. The sun no longer an object in the sky, it becomes the mirror of one's internal flame. Every element that once served as a bridge between the human and the divine now merges into one living unity, the great remembering. The elders spoke often of the eye that sees within, not the physical eye, but the one that perceives essence. When it opens, the world changes, not because the world shifts, but because the lens of perception clears. A leaf is no longer just a leaf. It becomes the unfolding geometry of life, the same pattern that beats within your chest. The whisper of the wind becomes a language. The movement of water becomes a song. Everything breathes together in a single, endless rhythm. This is awakening, the merging of the observer and the observed, where nothing stands apart. In their writings, they described the awakened state as the luminous heart. It is not ecstasy nor trance, but balance perfected. In it, the body feels lighter, as though every cell has remembered its origin in light. The breath no longer needs guidance. It flows like a river returning to the sea. The mind ceases to argue with life. It listens instead. Awareness expands beyond the edges of skin. One feels the heartbeat of another as one's own. Time loses its authority, and presence becomes infinite. They said that when the luminous heart awakens, illness itself transforms, not always by vanishing, but by revealing its purpose. The elders did not see disease as failure. They saw it as initiation, the body's final attempt to awaken the mind. When the lesson is seen, the pain softens, and the body either heals or transcends. In both, there is peace. The awakened healer no longer fights against suffering, they see through it. They understand that even pain serves the greater intelligence of evolution. One elder, known only as the keeper of silence, once said to his student, "When you cease to wish for healing, healing begins." At first the student could not understand, but years later, after countless rituals, he understood that awakening comes when the seeker dissolves, when one stops grasping at wholeness and instead becomes the space in which wholeness arises naturally. It is the ultimate surrender, not to death, but to life itself. During the final stages of their practice, the elders would retreat into solitude. Some would go to caves where light entered only as a silver thread at noon. Others to the forests, where rain was their companion. They would stay for 40 days, living only on water and the silence of the earth. When they emerged, people said their eyes carried the reflection of the sky, vast, calm, and timeless. These were not miracles. They were reflections of harmony restored. The energy within them matched the energy of creation itself. To look into their eyes was to see one's own soul mirrored back, luminous and eternal. Awakening, they taught, was not a destination, but a return to the source that had never truly been left. The same source that breathes galaxies into being breathes you now. To realize this not as idea but as living truth, that is awakening. In this realization, everything becomes prayer. Washing one's hands becomes a blessing. Drinking water becomes communion. Speaking becomes creation. Silence becomes praise. There was a sacred chant used only once in a lifetime, during the moment of full awakening. It had no words, only vibration. Those who heard it said it sounded like the echo of creation itself, a hum that resonated through the bones, through the ground, through the sky. It was said that the entire valley would shimmer faintly when it was sung, and even the birds would pause mid-flight. The elders taught that this sound was not produced by the voice, but by the soul. It was the resonance of total unity, when the inner and outer had become indistinguishable. They described awakening as standing in two worlds at once, the visible and the unseen, and realizing they were never separate. The breath you take is the breath the earth exhales. The thought that rises in you is the whisper of the stars recalling their origins. The warmth that moves through your hands is the same fire that burns at the heart of the sun. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Once felt, it cannot be unfelt. That knowing changes everything. In this state, time dissolves into presence. The future and past merge into the eternal now. The elders said, this is the true healing, the moment the soul ceases to wander between regrets and expectations. In presence, the body reorganizes itself instantly, cells vibrating to the rhythm of truth. That is why those who reached awakening often radiated health without effort. They were not trying to heal. They were simply existing in harmony with what is already perfect. The forgotten method thus transforms into a living state, one in which awareness itself heals, presence itself nourishes, and every breath becomes a bridge between form and spirit. It is no longer about remembering a ritual. It is about realizing that you are the ritual. The sacred geometry of life moves through your veins. The sound of creation hums beneath your skin. You are not separate from the divine. You are its expression in human form. The awakened ones walked gently upon the earth, for they knew every step touched eternity. They spoke little, smiled often, and carried an aura of quiet certainty. The elders said that the measure of awakening was not knowledge, but compassion. When your peace heals others, were they taught, you have remembered enough. And so, awakening became not an ending, but a beginning. The beginning of living fully awake within the ordinary, seeing eternity in a single drop of rain, divinity in the act of breathing, infinity in the warmth of a human hand. The elders saw no difference between prayer and action, between temple and garden, between sacred and mundane. Everything was one continuous gesture of love, the universe folding in on itself in gratitude. They knew that awakening spreads by presence, not by preaching. One awakened soul could ignite remembrance in countless others simply by being. No effort, no intention, only resonance. This is how their wisdom survived when their temples crumbled, when their scrolls were burned, when their names faded. The vibration of their remembrance entered the very air, the rivers, the stones. It lives still, waiting for those who become silent enough to hear it. In the moments of deepest stillness, if you listen closely, you can feel it, the same current that once flowed through the elders flowing through you. It hums quietly beneath the noise of thought, beneath the weight of time. It calls not for belief, but for surrender. Not for striving, but for remembrance. The forgotten method, in truth, was never lost. It is here now in the warmth of your chest, in the quiet between breaths, in the flicker of awareness that watches all things. And when you realize that the healer, the healed, and the act of healing are one and the same, that every breath is an offering and every heartbeat a hymn, then you have stepped into awakening. The light does not come from above, it rises from within. It was never gone, it only waited for you to remember. When the light finally returns, it does not announce itself. It moves quietly through the heart, the way dawn moves across the mountains, slow, golden, inevitable. Reflection is not the end of the journey, it is the realization that there was never a journey at all. The elders of the East used to say that awakening is not about reaching the divine, but about remembering you never left it. In this soft realization, the forgotten method completes its circle. They taught that once the body has remembered stillness, once the mind has remembered peace, and once the soul has remembered its eternity, life itself becomes the teaching. The wind becomes the scripture. The water becomes the temple. The silence becomes the final prayer. There is nothing left to seek, only to live fully, reverently, and awake. In the final days of training, when disciples had crossed the threshold of awakening, the elders would gather them in the inner courtyard at dusk. The air would be still, scented with incense and jasmine. Each student carried a small bowl of water, reflecting the faint light of the setting sun. They would stand in a circle as their teacher spoke the closing words of the path. You are now as the water, reflecting, flowing, becoming. And then together, they would pour their bowls into the earth, the sound of many streams merging into one, a symbol that all paths, all lives, all hearts return to the same ocean. It was their way of teaching that life too must be poured freely. The energy, the knowledge, the love, all must flow outward, uncontained. For if kept only within, it stagnates. The elder would look into the eyes of each disciple and whisper, "Let your peace move as water. Wherever it touches, it will heal." This was not metaphor, it was instruction. To carry awakening into the world is to heal it, not through effort but through presence. And so reflection became the quiet phase of service, the time when the awakened returned to the villages, not as masters, but as mirrors. They worked the fields, helped the sick, taught the children, and walked among people who would never know their names. They lived without the need to be seen because they had already seen everything. Their wisdom was woven into the ordinary, the way they listened, the way they breathed, the way they touched the earth with gratitude. Every gesture was prayer, every silence, teaching. There is an ancient saying among them, "The true teacher leaves no footprints on the path, only flowers where he stood." It means that awakening does not seek to impress, it seeks to bless. The awakened ones never declared enlightenment, they embodied simplicity. They laughed easily, they forgave quickly, they loved without measure. They spoke of nothing extraordinary, and yet in their presence, even the ordinary felt sacred. Reflection is the art of seeing without judgment, of recognizing that even the darkness served the light. The elders would often say, "Thank your shadows, for without them you would never know you are luminous." And so they looked upon their own lives with deep compassion, the mistakes, the wounds, the detours, all part of the design that led them home. They saw no wasted moment, no lost opportunity, no true failure. Everything was a step in the great remembering. They believed that after awakening, one's task was not to escape the world, but to love it more completely. The wind still blew, the body still aged, the seasons still changed. But now there was no resistance. The mind no longer argued with what is. They had become the river, flowing with life's turns and depths, unafraid of its direction. And in that surrender, freedom shone. In their final writings, the elders spoke of the circle of return. It was said that when one has remembered fully, they become the remembrance for others. Their energy vibrates into the world, like a soft note played on an unseen instrument. Someone somewhere hears it, not with the ears, but with the heart, and begins to awaken too. This is how the lineage continues, not through blood or temple, but through resonance. Awakening is contagious in the most sacred way. In reflection, you may begin to notice that what once seemed separate now feels familiar. The trees, the sky, the water, even the silence, all seem to recognize you. You feel them not as things, but as extensions of your own awareness. This is the natural result of remembering. The boundaries dissolve, and what remains is union. The elders said this is the final truth, that there is no outside, no other, no distance between the soul and the world. All things are reflections of the same consciousness, dancing in different forms. And so you live differently now. You move slower, but with purpose. You speak less, but with meaning. You feel deeply, but without attachment. Gratitude becomes your default breath. Where others see chaos, you see rhythm. Where others see chance, you see alignment. Life becomes less about control and more about communion. You begin to understand why the elders smiled so often, because they saw the divine in every imperfection. They saw that nothing needed fixing. It only needed remembering. The forgotten method was never meant to be taught in words, for words can only point toward the truth, never hold it. The real method lives in the silence between heartbeats, in the trust between breaths, in the stillness behind every motion. It is not a practice to be mastered, but a way of being, a return to harmony so complete that even thought becomes prayer. When the elders spoke of heaven, they did not mean a distant place. They meant the state of alignment where body, mind, and spirit are one, where love flows without resistance, where every act, even the smallest, carries the fragrance of eternity. To live in this way is to dwell in heaven while still on earth. This, they said, was the ultimate gift. Not escape from the human experience, but its sanctification. And so, as the story of the forgotten method draws to a close, it does not end with revelation, but with quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the body that carried you, for the breath that sustained you, for the water that mirrored your awakening. Gratitude for the pain that taught you patience, for the silence that guided you home. Gratitude for life itself, not as a problem to be solved, but as a miracle to be lived. In the last ceremony, the elders would gather one final time. No chants, no lessons, only presence. They would sit together in silence as the sun descended, their faces illuminated by the last light of day. One would pour water into another's hands, saying simply, "Return to flow." It was both farewell and beginning. The water would trickle through their fingers, back to the earth, back to the source, everything returning, everything whole. Reflection is the circle closing. It is the heart's acknowledgement that the journey was never to find something new, but to rediscover what was always yours, the unbroken light within. And now that you have remembered, you carry it forward. You become the elder, the one who moves gently, speaks truth softly, and heals not through doing, but through being. The one who knows that every dawn is a rebirth, and every drop of water carries eternity within it. The forgotten method lives on through you now. Every time you breathe with awareness, every time you bless your water before drinking, every time you pause before speaking, letting love choose your words, every time you forgive, every time you listen, every time you see beauty where others see none. You are practicing what the elders once lived. You are remembering the rhythm of the universe through the temple of your own body. And when you close your eyes tonight, you will feel it, that soft hum beneath all things, the current that never ceased, the current that was never lost, the current that connects you to the mountains, the stars, the unseen. It is the breath of the divine moving through you, whispering one final truth. You were never separate. You were never broken. You were always home. And in that realization, the forgotten method of the elders of the East fulfills its purpose. The body rests, the mind bows, the soul smiles. The circle is complete.